Hello everyone, hope you guys are doing well. In this video, we will go through 15 sample questions and answer them in detail to help you prepare for the AZ-204 Developing Solutions for Microsoft Azure exam. In case if you would like to purchase the entire set of practice questions, use the link in the description below. Also check out my YouTube channel. I have already covered the sample exam questions for other Azure certifications, and in case if you don't find them for any particular Azure certification, please leave a comment. I will create a video on that. So let's get started. A company is building a traffic monitoring system. The system monitors the traffic along 4 highways and responsible for producing a time series based report for each highway. The traffic sensors on each highway have been configured to send its data to Azure Event Hubs. The data from Event Hubs is then consumed by 3 departments, and each department makes use of an Azure web app to display the data. You have to implement the Azure Event Hub instance and ensure that data throughput is maximized and the latency is minimized. Which of the following would you use as the partition key? Since the data comes in for each highway, the highway represented by probably a highway number would be the ideal choice for the partition key. The other options are incorrect since they would not provide ideal values for distribution of data across different partitions. You deploy a web application to Azure with App Service on Linux. You then publish a custom Docker image to the Azure web app. Suppose you need to access the console logs generated from the container in real time. Which of the following would go into slot 1 in this Azure CLI script? To configure logging, we use the AZ web app log config command, so option A is the right choice. You can easily ignore the other options as it is evident from their names that download downloads a web app's log history as a zip file, and show gets the details of a web app's logging configuration, and tail starts live log tracing for a web app. You develop an Azure function that performs the following activities: read messages from an Azure storage queue and process the messages and add entities to Azure table storage. You have to define the correct bindings in this function.json file. Which of the following would go into area 1? Since we need to read messages from the Azure storage queue, an Azure queue storage trigger is defined as the first element in the binding array. And since we need to process and add entities to Azure table storage, the second element in the array will define the Azure table storage output binding. So the direction will be out here since it is an output binding, and the binding direction for triggers is always in. So option A is the right choice. You have to deploy a microservice-based application to the Azure Kubernetes cluster. The solution has the following requirements: reverse proxy capabilities, the ability to configure traffic routing, and termination of TLS with a custom certificate. Which of the following would you use to implement a single public IP endpoint to route traffic to multiple microservices? First, you need to know that an ingress is an object that manages external access to services in a cluster. One of the main reasons to use an ingress controller is that by using a single IP address, you can route traffic to multiple services in a Kubernetes cluster. The documentation mentions that an ingress controller is a piece of software that provides reverse proxy, configurable traffic routing, and TLS termination for Kubernetes services, all of which are a requirement in the question. So option D is the right choice. You develop an ASP.NET Core application which works with blobs in an Azure storage account. The application authenticates via Azure AD credentials. Role-based access has been implemented on the containers that contain the blobs. These roles have been assigned to the users. You have to configure the application so that the user's permissions can be used with the Azure Blob containers. Which of the following would you use as the permission for the Microsoft Graph API? Let's go through the process of creating a new app registration in Azure Active Directory for our ASP.NET Core application. Click App Registrations and then click New Registration. Enter a name for the app and then click Register. If you check the API permissions for the app, by default, the registered Azure AD application has access to the Microsoft Graph API. And the permission used by the app for accessing Microsoft Graph API is user.read. So option A is the right choice. You build a web application that's deployed to Azure. The application would not allow anonymous access and the authentication would be carried out via Azure AD. Further, the application needs to abide by the following requirements. Users must be able to log into the web application using their Azure AD credentials. The personalization of the web application must be based on the membership in Active Directory groups. You have to configure the application manifest file. Which of the following would go into slot 2? First, let me show you the application manifest file, which sometimes you would edit to configure the attributes of an application in Azure Active Directory. Go to App Registrations and then select your application. Click Manifest to view the application manifest file. All the applications contain something called as App ID, which is nothing but the application ID or the client ID. From this question, it is evident that the attribute will have a value of type Boolean. Now, to meet the requirements in this question, you would set the value of the attribute OAuth to allow implicit flow to true. This attribute specifies whether a web app can request OAuth 2.0 implicit flow access tokens for browser-based apps, like for example, the single-page apps. So option D perfectly fits what's asked in the question. Options OAuth 2 permissions and required resource access represent a value of type collections, so you can easily ignore them. If you need to understand all the attributes of the Azure Active Directory app manifest file, go through this documentation page. Which of the following needs to be used to secure the logic app? This question is about a case study that talks about the migration of an application from on-premises environment to Azure. You can log into the website and review the entire case study, but for this question, I will only highlight the parts relevant for us to answer the question. So this is the proposed architecture where the logic app integrates with different parts of the application to expose data via various APIs. One of the requirements of this logic app after migration is that the resources used by this logic app must be secured to the corporate virtual network. And we need to select the correct option for that requirement. Well, Logic App's integration service environment provides a fully isolated and dedicated environment for all enterprise-scale integration needs. When you create a new integration service environment, it is injected into your virtual network, which allows you to deploy Logic Apps as a service on your VNet. So option C is the right choice. VNet Service Endpoints secures your critical Azure service resources to only your virtual networks. Azure App Service Environment is an app service feature that provides a fully isolated and dedicated environment for running app service apps. And Azure AD B2B integration is related to identities in Azure Active Directory. You develop an application that makes use of Azure Service Bus. You create filters based on different types of subscribers that would subscribe to the topic. Which of the following would you use as the filter condition for the requirement? Subscribers should be able to receive all messages being sent to the topic. Well, Azure Service Bus supports three different filter conditions. They are Boolean filters, SQL filters, and correlation filters. Correlation filters as a set of conditions that are matched against the arriving messages. SQL filter holds a SQL-like conditional expression that's evaluated against the incoming messages. Boolean filters cause either all or none of the arriving messages to be selected for the subscription. Since the question mentions that we need to receive all messages sent to the topic, a Boolean filter would be more suitable. Your company has an Azure Kubernetes cluster. They want to create a new Azure AD group and provide RBAC access for the group to the cluster. You have to complete the below Azure CLI script to fulfill this requirement. Which of the following would go into slot 2? Well, the output of this command is assigned to a variable vislab_group. So it's obvious that slot 2 would have the Azure CLI command to create an Azure AD group. So option C is the right choice. A company has a web application deployed using the Azure Web App Service. The current service plan being used is D1. It needs to ensure that the application infrastructure can automatically scale when the CPU load reaches 85%. You also have to ensure that the costs are minimized. Which of the following steps would you implement to achieve the requirements? Choose 4 answers from the options given below. Well, let's go to Azure Web App Service, which has the App Service Plan D1 as mentioned in the question. This plan is only for the shared infrastructure and so contains only a limited number of features. For the D1 plan, auto-scaling is not supported, so the application cannot scale automatically when the CPU load reaches 85%. To enable auto-scaling, first you need to upgrade the App Service Plan tier. Plans like B1, B2 and B3 enable you to scale manually but not automatically. Auto-scaling is only available for the standard and the premium plans. So let's select a standard plan and apply the changes. For this plan, you can set auto-scaling based on your requirement. So these are the following steps to implement. First, we need to configure the web application to use the standard app service plan. Note that the premium app service plan works too, but since we need to ensure that the costs are minimized too, option D is incorrect. And since we need to select a total of 4 options, all the other 3 options must be selected to achieve the requirement. A company is implementing an order processing system. The orders are published to an Azure Service Bus topic. The properties of the messages that would be sent is given in the table. And the subscriptions along with the requirements is also given in the below table. You need to implement the right filters for each of the subscriptions given above. Which of the following would you implement for the subscription all orders? As we saw earlier, Azure Service Bus supports 3 different filter conditions. Since we need to implement for the subscription all orders, where all the orders should be sent, Boolean filters seems to be the most appropriate choice. And within Boolean filters, only the true filter enables you to receive all the arriving messages. So option C is the right choice. A company develops a shopping application for Windows devices. A notification needs to be sent on a user's device whenever a new product is entered into the application, so push notifications have to be implemented. You have to complete the missing parts in the partial code segment given below. Which of the following would go into slot 2? So this is the sample code to refer to for reading a message from the topic and then sending a notification to the mobile application using Azure Notification Hub. Here first, a hub connection string is defined. Then we create a notification hub client which represents an Azure Notification Hub client instance from the connection string. So in the slot 2 goes notification hub client. Well, you don't have to write or memorize code for your exams, but you just need to be aware of some important classes which will be used for filling in the blanks. You have to implement the AZ-copy tool to copy objects from a local folder named WizLabs in the D drive to a container named demo in the below storage account. And the AZ-copy command is given which copies all the objects in the local folder. Which of the following would go into slot 2? So to copy objects with the AZ-copy tool, use the AZ-copy command with the copy keyword. Then comes the local directory from where the objects need to be copied from. Next comes the destination URL of the target container in the storage account. Clearly, options C and D are incorrect. Option A is the right answer, as the correct URL for a storage account will be accountname.blob.core.windows.net/demo, which is the name of the container. The characters that you see after the container name are for the SAS token. You have to update the below code snippet that would be used to upload images to the blob container. Which of the following would go into slot 2? Well, this is the documentation page that talks about uploading blobs to a container. This code snippet gets a reference to the cloud blob object by calling this method on the container. We have a similar code snippet in the question here, just that instead of the cloud blob class, we have the WizLab cloud blob class. Now, cloud blob is nothing but a class that represents a blob that is uploaded as a set of blocks. It extends the cloud blob class, and you can create your own class that extends the cloud blob class. Seems here that WizLab cloud blob is created by extending the cloud blob class and will be the right answer to this question. A developer needs to enable Application Insights Profiler for Azure Web App. Which of the following feature is a prerequisite to enable the profiler? Azure Application Insights Profiler provides performance traces for applications that are running in production in Azure. Enabling identity is part of Azure Active Directory and is not related to Application Insights Profiler. Custom domains are a feature to access any Azure URI by a different or a customized URI. Hence, this is not related to Application Insights Profiler. Cross-origin resource sharing, or CORS, defines a way for web applications in one domain to interact with resources in another domain. CORS will not help in enabling Application Insights Profiler. To enable Application Insights Profiler for a web app, the correct prerequisite is to enable Always On. This is required because if a web app is idle for too long, Azure App Service unloads the website and it only loads the website again when the traffic returns. So by enabling Always On, you keep the web app up and running all the time, so Azure Application Insights Profiler can do its job all the time. Once you're done, submit the test and you can verify your performance from the result. Also, you can get the performance report domain-wise. So you can analyze the question for any particular domain and you will see all the questions related to that domain, their correct answers and explanations for each question, and also links to the Microsoft documentation in case you like to learn the concept in depth. So if you are preparing for the AZ-204 Developing Solutions for Microsoft Azure exam, Check the description for the link to the entire practice test, roughly 250 questions that cover the length and breadth of all the objectives in the exam. Also, check out my YouTube channel. I have already covered the sample exam questions for other Azure certifications, and in case if you don't find them for any particular Azure certification, please leave a comment. I will create a video on that.